no one in Hollywood could believe their eyes when they saw Sal Mineo's name splashed across the front page of the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, not in the familiar entertainment section, but in the crime news column. The actor who had been nominated for an Oscar, twice the man who once stood alongside James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, was now found collapsed and lifeless in a parking lot in West Hollywood. Yet that tragedy was far from being just another simple murder case. From the behind-the-scenes photo of Rebel, where the strange, almost unspoken look between Mineo and Dean hinted at something mysterious to the picture taken in Harold Stevenson's studio, where Mineo bravely posed nude to become the new Adam. And finally, the last photograph captured on the eve of his fateful night along Holloway Drive. Each image became a crucial piece of evidence in his case. And without a doubt, by the time you reach the end of this video, you'll understand why for nearly half a century, not a single police officer has dared to reopen the case file of Sal Mineo. In the 1940s, the Bronx in New York was nothing like the glamorous version seen on screen. It was a crowded, noisy neighborhood where old apartment buildings stood packed together, and the air was filled with the mingling scent of car exhaust and freshly baked Italian pastries. On the corner of East 222nd Street, in a small second-floor room of a modest house, lived a young boy named Salvatore Mineo Jr., the second son of an Italian immigrant family. His father, Salvatore Sr., ran a small cafe called Mineo's Cafe that served local workers and truck drivers, while his mother, Josephine, worked at a nearby grocery store. People often said she would secretly tuck away spare change in a tin box, saving it to one day pay for her son's acting lessons. From an early age, Sal stood out from the rest. While other kids in the Bronx loved playing soccer on the streets, he preferred standing in front of a mirror, mimicking the voices of actors on NBC radio, or reciting lines from Casablanca in his uniquely mixed Italian-American accent. A neighbor later told the Daily News that boy had the strangest eyes, gentle but sad, like he was looking off into another world. In 1948, at just 9 years old, Sal began attending a children's acting class at the Dramatic Workshop in Manhattan, a school that had trained legends like Marlon Brando and Tony Curtis. Instructor Cornelia Otis Skinner wrote in her memoir, "That boy absorbed every line as if he were swallowing the words whole. He didn't act, he lived the part." It was that deep, almost obsessive passion that caught the attention of theater director Joshua Logan during an audition. Only a year later, Sal was cast as Prince Chulalongkorn in the Broadway musical The King and I, performing alongside Yul Brynner and Gertrude Lawrence. At just 11 years old, the youngest member of the cast, he brought such depth and empathy to the role that audiences were astonished. There was even a moment backstage when Brynner lost his temper, complaining that the kid was stealing all the spotlight from the adults. Lawrence also told Variety that Mineo was too direct and hard to control. Yet it was precisely that raw authenticity that made audiences remember the boy long after the curtain fell. In the years that followed, Sal appeared frequently on television programs such as The Milton Berle Show and Studio One, quickly becoming a familiar teenage face to American viewers. However, rumors spread that Yul Brynner was displeased when he learned the boy had been offered a television project before him. Some entertainment columnists, including Luella Parsons, even wrote that Brynner vowed never to share the stage with Mineo again. By 1954, when The King and I came to an end, a representative from Warner Brothers visited the backstage area and told Josephine, "Your boy has eyes the camera will fall in love with." Soon after, they took Sal to Los Angeles to audition for a new film called Rebel Without a Cause. Josephine could never have imagined that her decision would not only alter the course of her son's life, but also place him at the center of one of the most controversial films in Hollywood history. In 1955, Sal Mineo stepped onto the Warner Brothers set in Burbank, California, where director Nicholas Ray was preparing for the most ambitious project of his career. The film revolved around three lost teenagers struggling to find their place in post-war America: Jim Stark, James Dean, Judy, Natalie Wood, and Plato Sal Mineo. During a rehearsal scene at an abandoned mansion in Griffith Park, Nicholas Ray sat silently watching, then leaned toward cinematographer Ernest Haller and whispered, "Keep the camera rolling. I want to see the look in that boy's eyes when he looks at Dean." That very scene would later become one of cinema's most iconic moments. Plato looked at Jim with a gaze that mixed admiration and vulnerability, as if seeking shelter for his soul. Film critic Richard Schickel later wrote in Life magazine, "It was one of those rare moments when American cinema touched the truth about loneliness and the desire to be understood. Yet, behind the camera, things were far from peaceful. James Dean, only 24 at the time, had already earned his reputation as Hollywood's rebel. Natalie Wood was just 16, entangled in a complicated affair with the film's director Nicholas Ray, who was more than 20 years her senior. On screen, Dean and Wood played lovers. Off-screen rumors swirled that Ray often took Wood back to his private apartment at the Chateau Marmont to discuss her character in depth. 17-year-old Sal found himself caught between two worlds. He admired Dean like an older brother, but was equally fascinated by the chaos surrounding the film's production. Gossip columnist Hedda Hopper once revealed that Dean was very fond of Mineo and often drove him around Los Angeles in his silver Porsche Spyder. A few members of the crew confirmed their closeness, though no one knew what they truly shared. Dean was known for spending hours in silence on set, speaking only to Mineo at the end of each day's shoot. When Rebel Without a Cause premiered in October 1955, audiences were stunned. The character of Plato was seen as the very soul of the film, a symbol of wounded youth, fragile, yet yearning for affection. What drew the most attention, however, was Plato's gaze toward Jim Stark. "Why was it so intimate?" Time magazine wrote, with subtle implication. Here is a teenage boy who expresses deep affection for a friend of the same sex, something never before seen on the big screen. In the social climate of that era, even a single line like that was enough to cause an uproar. But surprisingly, audiences didn't turn away, they felt compassion. Mineo was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor at just 17, making him one of the youngest actors ever to receive such recognition. Yet fame brought a storm of speculation in its wake. Tabloids like Confidential Magazine and Modern Screen ran sensational headlines, such as "Is the Bronx Boy?", "Too Close to James Dean," and "A Strange Friendship Behind the Scenes of Rebel." When James Dean died in a devastating car crash in Cholame, California in September 1955, only weeks after filming wrapped, Mineo was nearly broken. He skipped the premiere, choosing instead to quietly send flowers to Dean's family. The Los Angeles Examiner ran the headline, "Dean's Youngest Friend Vanishes from Hollywood." In a rare 1956 interview with KTLA, Sal softly said he was the first person who made me believe I could be myself. The remark was later quoted by numerous newspapers, further fueling the public's curiosity. Yet, the glow of Rebel quickly faded into pressure. Mineo suddenly became a symbol of lost youth, too delicate to play the hero, yet too intense to fit the mold of a gentle character. In the years that followed, he gradually turned onto a new path, stepping into an entirely different world, one where he no longer needed lines to speak, only a microphone, and the thunderous cheers of thousands of fans, the pop music stage. By late 1956, Rebel Without a Cause was slowly being forgotten by Hollywood. James Dean was gone. Natalie Wood had become an A-list star, and Sal Mineo, the Bronx boy, once nominated for an Oscar, found himself trapped in the fog of fading fame. Studios didn't know where to place him, too unconventional to play clean-cut heroes, yet too famous to simply disappear. During those months of unemployment, Sal lived quietly in a small apartment in Laurel Canyon, its walls covered with photographs of old friends. On a wooden table by the window, a picture of Dean still sat there beside an old RCA radio. That very radio would open the door to another world for him. One evening, while listening to American Bandstand play a song by Elvis Presley, Sal suddenly thought, "If they don't want me to act, I'll sing." What seemed like a passing impulse soon turned real. Just a few weeks later, RCA Victor actually approached him with an offer to record. They knew the public still remembered the boy who once played Plato and wanted to transform that image into a pop music star. In early 1957, the single "Start Movin' in My Direction" was released. Within only 2 weeks, it shot to number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 and Thacker 16 in the UK, selling over 1 million copies, a number that even caught Elvis's attention. The press called it the miracle from the Bronx, and The Ed Sullivan Show invited Mineo to perform live before millions of television viewers. The record cover, featuring his radiant smile and slicked-back hair, spread everywhere in record shops, college dorms, and even in the lockers of high school girls. 17 magazine dubbed him America's Prince of Smiles, while Modern Screen ran a bold headline, "From Plato's shadows to the spotlight of a national idol." Yet, behind those dazzling lights, Sal felt empty inside. He was forced to maintain the image of a good boy that his record label demanded. When a photoplay reporter asked if he was seeing anyone, the company quickly arranged for him to be seen with young actress Jill Howarth at a staged party. Photos of them holding hands at the Beverly Hills Hotel flooded the newspapers, but friends later told The Hollywood Reporter that they had only met 3 times and had barely spoken privately. Behind the scenes, Mineo felt like he was being turned into a product for others to profit from. He confided to a Variety journalist that he was under contract to perform continuously in New York, Chicago, Dallas, and Las Vegas, forbidden from changing his hairstyle or speaking freely. Around this time, rumors emerged that Elvis Presley had once invited Mineo to perform with him in a live show. According to the Los Angeles Examiner, RCA representatives blocked the invitation, claiming that the two were too similar in image and unnecessary competition. The singing career brought Sal thousands of dollars a week, but it also made Hollywood turn its back on him. Directors no longer believed in the acting ability of a pop idol. Some of his former co-stars even mocked him. Natalie Wood once joked on Peter Potter's radio show, "Sal's too busy signing records to make movies anymore." Behind the bright smile on the album covers were long, lonely nights. Friends said he often drove his Ford Thunderbird along Sunset Boulevard, listening to music and talking to himself. In a journal later found among his belongings, Sal wrote, "They want me to sing like a machine, while all I ever wanted was to tell stories through emotion." Just when his fame seemed to be slipping away from the world of cinema, an unexpected phone call from Otto Preminger changed everything. In the summer of 1959, Sal Mineo arrived in Israel. He was 21 years old, then thinner than before, his hair neatly cropped short, his face tanned under the Mediterranean sun. The film Exodus was being shot in Jerusalem and Cyprus, recreating the arduous journey of Jewish refugees searching for a new homeland after World War II. Preminger cast Mineo as Dov Landau, a young man who had survived a concentration camp and carried deep psychological scars. On set, Preminger was known for being demanding to the point of cruelty. He required Mineo to read the real files of Holocaust victims in order to fully absorb the emotional depth of his character. There were days when Mineo filmed for 12 straight hours under the blistering 42-degree heat, his sweat mixing with dust until his uniform clung to his skin. Cinematographer Sam Levitt recalled that during one scene where Dov relived his imprisonment, Mineo actually fainted. The set fell completely silent. No one dared to touch him. When he regained consciousness, he whispered, "Keep that take. Don't reshoot it. It was real." That scene would later bring an entire New York theater audience to its feet in applause. The New York Times published a lengthy review praising him. "Mineo is no longer the boy Plato. He is the soul of survival." The performance earned him the Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actor in 1961, and a second Oscar nomination, a rare achievement for a 21-year-old actor. Yet that dazzling success also ignited controversy. Some conservative critics refused to believe that a pop idol could deliver such a powerful, weighty performance. The Los Angeles Times ran a headline questioning, did Mineo truly act, or was it just the audience's sympathy? Meanwhile, director Preminger openly criticized Hollywood, saying they fear him because he refuses to obey. The filming of Exodus was equally tense behind the scenes. Daily Variety reported that during the final shoot in Cyprus, Mineo and Preminger had a heated argument because the director wanted him to express pain through screaming, while Sal insisted that silence is far more terrifying. The disagreement escalated to the point that production was halted for a day. Preminger, known for his arrogance, ultimately kept Mineo's restrained, silent interpretation in the final cut. While Exodus was being celebrated everywhere, the press began digging into the past. A columnist from The Hollywood Reporter brought up the close relationship between Mineo and Paul Newman, his co-star in the film, insinuating that they were closer than usual. The rumor spread so widely that Newman was forced to publicly clarify on NBC's Tonight Show, "Sal is like a younger brother to me. Don't make up stories." Mineo's career had reached its peak, yet it was precisely at that moment that Hollywood began to change its taste. A new generation of young stars like Warren Beatty and Robert Redford was rising, while Mineo found himself trapped in the image of the sensitive young man. Studios grew increasingly hesitant, fearing that the public had lost interest in him. After the spectacular success of Exodus, Sal looked around and realized that the world of cinema no longer had a place for him in an era dominated by strong, heroic figures. He began searching for a way to break free from his old image, choosing a new path, bold, risky, and full of challenge. One where he was willing to gamble his entire reputation just to be seen as a true artist. In 1963, while most Hollywood stars were still clinging to their polished, picture-perfect images on magazine covers, Sal Mineo, a two-time Academy Award nominee, had almost completely disappeared from the screen. He refused to keep playing the same repetitive, sensitive young man roles, withdrew from Hollywood, and moved back to New York, settling in a small apartment in Greenwich Village, a place that only a few years later would become the heart of the counterculture movement. In those early lonely days, he met Harold Stevenson, an Oklahoma-born painter gaining attention for his role in the New Realism movement, known for his massive canvases depicting the male form with an almost obsessive level of detail. In a 1964 interview with Art in America, Stevenson recalled, "When I met Sal, I saw a sadness in him, as if he were trapped inside his own body. I wanted to paint that." At the time, Stevenson was working on an enormous project titled The New Adam, a painting nearly 12 meters long, 839 feet, portraying a man lying outstretched as a symbol of America's post-war rebirth. He asked directly, "Do you have the courage to become the image of the new man?" Mineo agreed without hesitation. That decision sent shockwaves through Hollywood. At the time, it was virtually unheard of for an A-list movie star, especially one from blockbuster films, to pose nude for an artist. The Los Angeles Examiner ran a bold headline, "Sal Mineo leaves Hollywood to bear it all," while Variety called it a quiet act of career suicide. Stevenson and Mineo worked together for nearly 2 months in a studio in New York's Bowery district. According to records preserved at the Guggenheim Museum, Mineo often came in the evenings to avoid photographers. Some reports claimed he had signed a confidentiality agreement. But by the end of the year, a gallery employee accidentally leaked to the Village Voice that Stevenson's model was the star who once appeared alongside James Dean. The rumor spread like wildfire. When The New Adam premiered at the Guggenheim Museum in October 1964, thousands of people lined up around Fifth Avenue just to see it in person. The painting depicted a man's body bathed in soft light, his skin rendered with the delicate realism of a Greek sculpture, his face obscured in shadow. Critics hailed it as the rise of the naked self, but the public fixated on one burning question: was the man in the painting Sal Mineo? Hollywood's reaction was swift. The studios turned their backs on him. Warner Brothers canceled his role in the greatest story ever told. The Hollywood Citizen News branded him a destroyer of the screen's moral standards. Yet in New York's art circles, he was celebrated as a pioneer. Andy Warhol invited him to the factory, and Interview magazine wrote, "Mineo is stepping out of Hollywood's shadow to become a symbol of creative freedom." When asked about the controversy, Sal spoke calmly on The Mike Douglas Show, "I didn't do anything wrong. I just appeared as myself." Maybe Hollywood doesn't like that, but art was never meant to be comfortable. After The New Adam, Mineo was virtually shut out of every film studio. Friends recalled that he would often wander alone at night along Venice Beach, jotting down stray thoughts and ideas in a small notebook. It was during this period of rejection that he found a new escape: the stage. Director Robert Allen Ackerman, an old friend, later recalled, "Sal once told me, 'If they won't let me act on film, I'll build my own stage.' And then he truly did it." In 1969, the name Sal Mineo appeared once again on the marquee of the Coronet Theater in Los Angeles, but this time not as an actor, rather as a director. That spring, the Los Angeles Free Press began buzzing about a dangerous new play set to premiere at the Coronet Fortune in Men's Eyes, written by Canadian playwright John Herbert, which explored the power dynamics among men in prison. The play had previously been banned in Toronto for being beyond moral limits. No one could have imagined that a 2-time Academy Award nominee would dare to take on such a provocative subject. But Mineo saw in the script something far deeper than shock value, a story of loneliness, repression, and the yearning for freedom. Feelings he understood all too well after more than a decade of being shackled by Hollywood. He bought the performance rights himself, personally rented the Coronet Theater on La Cienega Boulevard, and turned it into an intimate stage space with just over 100 seats. For months, he painstakingly searched for the right cast. During the final audition, a lean 19-year-old with defiant eyes walked in: Don Johnson, a college dropout from the University of Kansas chasing a chance. While others were skeptical, Mineo simply said, "I see in you what I once saw in the mirror when I played Play-Doh." He immediately gave Johnson the lead role, a decision that stunned the theater world. When Fortune and Men's Eyes officially premiered in February 1969, the public reaction was explosive. The Los Angeles Times wrote, "The theater fell silent, and only breathing could be heard." This was no longer a stage, it was a place where human souls were laid bare. Critic Charles Champlin remarked, "Mineo is no longer a lost actor. He has become the storyteller of what America refuses to face." But success came hand in hand with scandal. The National Enquirer and The Hollywood Reporter ran repeated insinuations about a too-close relationship between Mineo and Don Johnson. The rumors spread so quickly that Johnson had to speak up in Rolling Stone's Sal was the man who saved me from my own naivety as an actor. He believed in me when no one else did. The play became the center of a fierce cultural storm. The Los Angeles Cultural Council issued a formal complaint, while young audiences packed the house night after night. Fortune and Men's Eyes sold out for weeks, becoming one of the rare theatrical phenomena on the West Coast. From a star once cast out by Hollywood, Mineo was now celebrated in the theater world as a pioneer who broke boundaries. The New York Post wrote, "He is a man who has died twice and resurrected himself through art." As for Don Johnson, who would later rise to fame in Miami Vice, he often said, "If it weren't for Sal, I might never have made it past my first audition door." Even so, praise could not erase the fractures in Mineo's career. Major studios remained cautious, fearing that the name Sal Mineo would always be associated with artistic scandal. Yet Sal refused to retreat. In a 1971 interview with journalist Bose Hadley, he stated candidly, "I'm no longer afraid of losing my reputation. What I fear most is not having the courage to tell the truth." When the curtain finally fell on Fortune and Men's Eyes, the audience rose to their feet in prolonged applause, unwilling to let the moment end. But for Sal, this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where he no longer performed from Hollywood scripts, but lived out the story of his own life. From the bright lights of the Coronet Theater, Sal Mineo's path gradually led him to the most courageous decision of his life, to reveal his true self during a time when America was still far from ready to face that truth. By the mid-1970s, while Hollywood was captivated by a new generation of actors like Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, and Robert De Niro, the face that had once charmed all of America had nearly vanished from the screen. Sal Mineo now lived quietly in a small apartment in Laurel Canyon, sometimes riding his silver motorcycle along Sunset Boulevard before stopping by Musso and Frank's Cafe, a familiar gathering spot for old Hollywood actors. Many still recognized him, greeted him warmly, yet no one asked what movie he was working on anymore. The glow of rebel without a cause had long since faded. Film contracts no longer came his way, while rumors continued to cling to his name without pause. The National Enquirer once ran the headline, "Mineo, famous not for his roles, but for the mystery surrounding his life." As Hollywood evolved, Sal chose a path that shocked everyone. He decided to be honest about who he really was. One afternoon at a small cafe on Sunset Boulevard, journalist Bose Hadley, known for his interviews with stars who were difficult to open up, came to meet Sal. They talked for hours about cinema, about the years he had been confined to the label of teen idol. Then Hadley suddenly asked, "Who was the person you loved most in your life?" Mineo gazed out the window silent for a long moment before speaking softly, his voice low and weary. "I've loved men and I've loved women. There's nothing to hide about that." What might have seemed like a simple personal confession struck like thunder in the clear Hollywood sky of 1972. It was a time when film studios controlled every aspect of an actor's image, when being different meant being erased from the list of potential leads. The very next day, several entertainment gossip papers picked up the scent of the story. The Hollywood Reporter ran a small line, "Sal Mineo shares an unusual view on love." Meanwhile, Variety chose silence, the kind of silence Hollywood reserved for those it intended to bury. Yet those close to Sal said he seemed lighter than ever. Friends revealed that he was in a serious relationship with Courtney Burr III, a stage actor who also taught acting alongside him in West Hollywood. They rented a small rehearsal space together and were sometimes seen strolling around Beverly Hills. Many continued to gossip, but Sal no longer cared. In a 1975 interview with People magazine, he said, "I don't want to live behind a mask anymore." Hollywood, however, was not ready for such honesty. Directors stopped calling. Producer David Merrick refused to sign a new contract with him, saying his name makes the television networks uneasy. Some of his former co-stars even avoided appearing with him on red carpets. The New York Post described it plainly: Sal Mineo has become a man admired by the entire city and yet utterly isolated. Even so, in another light, he became a symbol of courage and authenticity. Independent art magazines in Los Angeles called him the man who dared to live truthfully in a world of hypocrisy. Sal continued to dedicate himself to the theater, including the play P.S. Your Cat is Dead, a dark comedy infused with psychological depth that he deeply cherished, as if he had found himself in every line of dialogue. That play was his final hope, the one thing that might help him reclaim his place in the hearts of audiences. But fate would not grant Sal Mineo the chance to begin again. It happened on a quiet evening in the heart of Los Angeles. After a late rehearsal of P.S. Your Cat is Dead at the Westwood Playhouse, Mineo left the stage later than usual. Just hours earlier, he had finished a discussion about bringing the play to Broadway. In his hand, he still held a folded script, inside of which was a slip of paper that read, "Opening Night March." Perhaps that night would have marked the long-awaited return, nearly 10 years after Hollywood had left him behind. As he drove back to his apartment at 8563 Holloway Drive in West Hollywood, the city had already gone dark. The neighborhood was peaceful back then, a mix of artist bars and aging apartment buildings. Several neighbors later recalled seeing him park his car, the script still in his hand, softly whistling as if in a good mood. Then suddenly a strange sound, just a few seconds, and then silence. When police arrived, they found Sal collapsed beside his car. His neighbor Janet Roberts told KTLA News, "At first we thought someone had tripped, but when we ran out, I saw he wasn't breathing." The news broke just hours later, sending shockwaves through Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Herald-Examiner ran the front-page headline, "Star of Rebel Without a Cause Found Dead in West Hollywood Parking Lot." Speculation spread immediately. The National Enquirer claimed he might have been followed, while The Hollywood Reporter suggested it was a robbery gone wrong. The police found nothing missing except for his wristwatch and the script, which had fallen a few feet from his body. The case quickly went cold. 2 years later, during a renewed investigation, police arrested Lionel Ray Williams, a 19-year-old security guard with a record of robbery. Williams confessed that he had attacked Sal in an attempted mugging, unaware that the man he stabbed was a famous actor. The Los Angeles court sentenced him to 51 years in prison. Prosecutor Stephen Kay told CBS News, "This wasn't a conspiracy, but it shattered Hollywood's sense of safety." Even after the conviction, rumors surrounding Sal Mineo's death never ceased. Some entertainment writers argued that the investigation had been rushed because the victim was no longer a box office star. Journalist Michael Greg Michaud, author of Sal Mineo, a biography, said in an interview with Vanity Fair, if he'd still been at the height of his fame like Dean or Brando, things might have turned out differently. Mineo's funeral was a modest one held at Gate of Heaven Cemetery in New York. Natalie Wood sent white flowers, Don Johnson delivered the eulogy, and Courtney Burr III stood quietly in the back, avoiding the cameras. The Los Angeles Times wrote, "A talent twice nominated for an Oscar leaves in silence, yet his gaze from Rebel still burns undimmed." Today, the front of the parking lot where he fell still remains now a small memorial. Fans often bring flowers and sometimes an old black and white photograph bearing the words "For Plato, the boy who never grew old." The story of Sal Mineo may have ended in West Hollywood, but his legacy has never faded. From a poor boy in the Bronx to the heights of Oscar acclaim, from rejection to the courage of living truthfully, he walked the full path of an artist, unafraid to face both the world and himself. Beneath the layers of scandal, rumor, and tragedy, there remains a familiar gaze, the gaze of young Plato, forever looking upward, longing to be understood, to be loved, and to live as nothing less than his true self. There are stars who spend their entire lives chasing recognition. And then there are those like Sal Mineo who live to prove that sometimes the truth can cost far more than fame itself. The photographs he left behind do more than trace the footsteps of his journey. They mirror an entire era, one where the dazzling lights of Hollywood could just as easily hide the deepest shadows of the human soul. Even now, people still bring flowers to his old apartment on Holloway Drive, as if each bouquet were a belated apology that Hollywood never had the courage to speak aloud. If this story leaves your heart heavy, share your thoughts in the comments below. Which moment from Sal's life haunts you the most? And don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next chapters of our Hidden Files of Hollywood.